When Daniel asked me to join him on a weekend mountain trip, I didn't hesitate. We had been close friends for years, but the thought of spending 2 days with him away from the noise of daily life stirred something deeper inside me. I had always carried a quiet longing for him, tucked away behind laughter and loyalty, convinced he would never notice. Daniel was straight, or at least that was the role he claimed, complete with stories about his girlfriend, Emily, and the easy charm he wore around women. For me, the invitation was a mixture of excitement and dread. Excitement because the chance to be near him, uninterrupted, was irresistible. Dread because being alone with him would magnify everything I usually worked so hard to hide. The way my gaze lingered too long, how my pulse raced whenever he brushed against me. Still, I said yes without pause, telling myself it was only a friendly adventure. The drive up into the mountains set the tone. Daniel filled the car with his usual playlist, classic rock tracks he sang along to, his voice unpolished but heartfelt. I sat in the passenger seat, pretending to focus on the passing scenery while secretly savoring how carefree he looked behind the wheel. We shared snacks, tossed jokes back and forth, and for a while it felt like we were simply two old friends escaping the grind of the city. Yet beneath that surface, a current of unspoken tension hummed, and I carried it like a secret fire. The hike began just before noon. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and damp earth. Daniel led the way with easy strides, his backpack slung over one shoulder. I followed, occasionally stumbling on loose rocks, only for him to offer a hand without hesitation. Each touch lingered longer in my mind than it should have. I laughed it off, but inside I replayed the warmth of his grip, the casual intimacy that meant everything to me but nothing to him. Hours passed as we ascended. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Old memories, new plans, silly debates about music and movies. With each step, I found myself caught between the comfort of familiarity and the ache of wanting more. At one point, Daniel stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a boulder. His face glistened with sweat, his chest rising and falling. "Man, this is tougher than I thought," he chuckled, and I forced myself to look away before my admiration became obvious. By evening, we had set up camp on a ridge, overlooking a valley. The view stretched endlessly, mountains fading into the horizon, the sky painted in shades of gold and violet. We sat by the fire, eating simple meals from tin containers, and the conversation grew quieter, more reflective. Daniel spoke about his relationship with Emily, how things had been strained, how he wasn't sure where they were headed. He didn't go into detail, but the way his voice dipped suggested frustration he hadn't shared with anyone else. I listened, nodding, careful not to betray my conflicted emotions. Part of me ached at the thought of him with her. Another part latched onto his uncertainty as if it were some hidden door cracking open. Yet I knew better than to let my imagination run wild. He was my friend, and friends didn't cross certain lines. The fire crackled between us, throwing sparks into the night sky. Daniel leaned back, gazing at the stars, his expression softened by the flickering glow. "Sometimes I feel like I don't even know what I want anymore," he admitted quietly. I didn't respond right away. The temptation to confess everything I had buried for years rose sharply, but I swallowed it down. Instead, I offered him a reassuring smile and said, "Maybe that's what this trip is for. A little clarity." He gave a short laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then he stretched out, lying flat on the ground, arms folded behind his head. I joined him, our shoulders nearly touching as we stared at the infinite spread of stars. The silence between us was heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged with something unsaid. When the fire dimmed, we retreated into the tent. The space was small, our sleeping bags laid side by side. Daniel drifted off quickly, his breathing deep and steady, while I lay awake, staring at the fabric ceiling above me. Every sound of the forest pressed in, the rustle of leaves, the call of distant owls. But louder than all of it was the pounding of my own heart. I told myself it was just a trip, just two friends sharing a tent on a mountain. But in that moment, lying inches away from him, I knew something had shifted. I couldn't name it yet, but it was there, a tension waiting to unravel, a story that hadn't yet been told. The morning light crept into the tent, thin golden stripes cutting through the fabric. I woke slowly, half dreaming, only to realize that Daniel's arm was draped across my waist. For a moment, I didn't breathe. His warmth pressed against me, steady and natural, as if he belonged there. I wanted to stay frozen in that suspended second, but then he stirred. "Oh, sorry, man," he mumbled, pulling back quickly, his cheeks flushed though he tried to laugh it off. I forced a smile. "No worries. Close quarters, right?" My voice sounded casual, but inside I was rattled. That accidental embrace lingered in my thoughts far longer than it should have. We packed our gear in silence thicker than the morning mist, both of us careful not to acknowledge the unspoken. Yet the silence wasn't emptiness. It pulsed with something neither of us dared name. As the day unfolded, we hiked higher into mountains. The air thinned, crisp and sharp, filling our lungs with every step. The path narrowed, forcing us closer together, shoulders brushing, legs moving in rhythm. Daniel cracked jokes, exaggerating his exhaustion, but every so often his eyes lingered on me longer than usual, as if measuring something he couldn't yet articulate. At one steep incline, I slipped on a loose rock. Daniel's hand shot out, gripping mine firmly, pulling me upright with an ease that belied the effort. His grip lingered longer than necessary. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable, before he finally let go. We rested at a clearing, sharing water and a granola bar. Conversation drifted toward his relationship again. "Emily doesn't get me anymore," Daniel admitted, staring at the horizon instead of me. "It feels like we're going through the motions, like I'm stuck." I hesitated, unsure if I should respond. His vulnerability pulled me closer, but I feared saying the wrong thing. "Maybe you're changing, and she can't keep up," I said carefully. He glanced at me then, his eyes searching, as if he wanted me to reveal something hidden. The air between us thickened, charged with implication. By late afternoon, we reached a cliffside lookout. The valley below stretched endlessly, layers of forest rolling into distant peaks. We sat side by side, legs dangling over the edge, silence hanging heavier than words. Daniel exhaled deeply. "Do you ever feel like you're living a version of yourself that isn't the whole truth?" he asked quietly. The question startled me. My pulse thundered, every buried thought clawing its way to the surface. "Every day," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned toward me. His eyes, uncertain, searching, held mine longer than they should have. The pause between us became unbearable, a taut thread threatening to snap. Then it happened. He leaned forward, almost hesitant, and our lips brushed together. It was brief, tentative, yet it ignited something fierce. He pulled back, quickly, breathing hard, eyes wide with disbelief. I don't know why I did that," he stammered. "I should have stopped it. I should have protected the boundary of our friendship. But years of silence, years of yearning, broke free. Because you wanted to," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in again, this time with urgency. The kiss deepened, raw and unrestrained, a collision of longing and confusion. For those moments, nothing else existed, no mountain, no girlfriend, no consequences. Just him and me. When we finally broke apart, both of us were trembling. His hand brushed through his hair, his breath uneven. "This is wrong," he said, but the way his fingers grazed mine contradicted his words. Back at the tent, the tension followed us like a shadow. Darkness fell quickly, the fire reduced to embers. Lying side by side, the closeness became unbearable. He reached for me first, hesitation fading into reckless certainty. The world outside disappeared. Later, silence filled the tent, heavy and fragile. Daniel turned away, his back to me, but his hand still rested loosely against mine. Sleep evaded me. My chest ached with a swirl of triumph and guilt. What we had just done was undeniable. It had crossed every boundary, broken every unspoken rule. Yet, beneath the weight of that realization, a dangerous truth glimmered. I didn't regret it. The morning after felt heavier than the mountain air itself. I woke to the sound of birds echoing through the trees, sunlight spilling across the thin walls of the tent. Daniel was already sitting up, lacing his boots, his movements sharp and deliberate. He didn't look at me. "Sleep okay?" he asked, his voice flat, as though he were addressing the silence more than me. Yeah, I lied, though my body still hummed with the memory of the night before. I wanted to reach out, to acknowledge what had passed between us, but the distance in his tone warned me off. We packed in near silence. The ease we had always shared, laughter inside jokes, careless banter, had vanished, replaced by pauses that seemed to stretch for miles. Daniel kept his eyes on the ground, and I kept my questions trapped inside. What had felt inevitable in the darkness now seemed impossible under the daylight. The descent down the mountain was slower, less spirited. Daniel stayed a few paces ahead, his posture rigid. I studied the back of his figure, wondering if he was replaying the same memories I was, his lips pressed against mine, his whispered gasps in the tent, the warmth of his hand clutching mine like he didn't want to let go. Or maybe I thought bitterly he was already burying it, framing it as a mistake. At one point, he slowed his pace, waiting for me to catch up. His expression softened, but only slightly. "Listen," he began, his voice low. "What happened last night? We can't let it mess with things. You get that, right?" I nodded before I could stop myself, though the words burned. "Of course." But inside, I wanted to ask, mess with what? Our friendship? His relationship with Emily? The fragile version of himself he was trying to protect? None of it was clear, and I wasn't sure he wanted clarity. The car ride home was no easier. Music filled the space where conversation used to be, his hand tapping against the steering wheel in restless rhythms. I kept sneaking glances, hoping for a sign, a smile, some crack in the wall he had built overnight. But he stayed focused on the road, his jaw tight. Only once did he break the silence. "I need to figure some things out with Emily," he said, quietly, almost to himself. The words stung more than I expected. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur into one another, trying not to let him see the disappointment etched across my face. If he noticed, he didn't mention it. Back in the city, our goodbye was abrupt, stripped of warmth. A quick nod, a muttered, "See you later," and then he was gone, swallowed into the familiar rhythm of his life. I stood there for a long time, wondering if the mountain would become just another secret we never spoke of. Days turned into weeks, and distance grew like a wall between us. Daniel's messages became shorter, his calls less frequent. When we did talk, his voice carried a strain I had never heard before, as if every word was measured. I told myself he was busy, that life had pulled him elsewhere. But deep down I knew the truth. He was retreating, erasing what we had shared before it could reshape him. I tried to carry on, but the memories clung to me. The way he had kissed me like he needed it, the way his voice had broken when he whispered my name in the dark. Those moments played on a loop in my mind, equal parts bliss and torment. I was caught between pride at finally tasting what I had longed for, and guilt at the betrayal that made it possible. Emily never knew, at least not for me, and Daniel never mentioned her again in my presence. The silence between us became its own kind of confession. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he remembers the trip as vividly as I do. Does he think of the firelight dancing across our faces? The stars we stared at in silence? The way the world seemed to collapse to just the two of us in that tent? Or has he convinced himself it was nothing but a lapse, a mistake to be discarded? I don't know. What I do know is this. The mountain gave me something real, even if it lasted only a heartbeat. A taste of a love that shouldn't have existed. A truth that fractured the roles we had played for years. And though it ended in silence and distance, I carry it with me, both the sweetness and the sting. Because sometimes the most unforgettable stories are the ones we cannot tell, the ones that live only in memory, burning quietly like embers we can never fully extinguish. Weeks slipped by in uneven rhythms. Daniel and I spoke less and less, our conversations reduced to fragments of what they once were. When his name appeared on my phone, a sharp thrill coursed through me, only to dissolve into disappointment at the brevity of his replies. He was retreating, not abruptly but gradually, like a tide pulling back from the shore. I told myself to accept it, to let the memory of the mountain remain a fleeting secret. But every night, as I lay awake, the images returned with ruthless clarity. His lips on mine, the sound of his breath breaking against my ear, the warmth of his hand in the cold air. These weren't dreams, they had happened, and I couldn't unlive them. One evening, Daniel finally called. His voice was uneven, heavy with something he wasn't ready to confess. "Hey, we should probably talk," he said. The words carried both promise and dread. My chest tightened. "Okay, when?" "Tomorrow, after work. Usual spot?" The usual spot was a small cafe near the edge of the city, tucked away enough for private conversations. I arrived early, restless, rehearsing possible outcomes. When Daniel walked in, he looked older somehow, eyes shadowed, shoulders tense. He sat down without a smile. We didn't touch our coffee. He got straight to it. "Emily knows something's off," he admitted. "She keeps asking why I'm distracted, why I pull away when she reaches for me. I don't know what to tell her." I swallowed hard, the guilt pressing down like a weight. "Do you want to tell her?" His eyes flicked up, sharp and uncertain. "No, I can't. Look, what happened between us, it can't happen again. It shouldn't have happened at all." The words sliced deeper than I expected, but I forced myself to stay calm. "So, it meant nothing to you?" He hesitated. That pause said more than any denial could. "It meant too much," he admitted finally, his voice barely audible. "That's the problem." Silence stretched between us, brittle and dangerous. I wanted to reach across the table, to remind him of the connection we had felt, but I also knew this wasn't about me alone. He was caught between two versions of himself, the man who clung to Emily and the one who had kissed me under the stars. "Daniel," I said softly, "you don't have to decide right now. Just don't erase it. Don't pretend it didn't happen." His jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "I don't know if I can carry it without breaking everything else." We left the cafe, without resolution, our goodbye stiff and uncertain. That night, I lay awake replaying every word, every flicker of conflict in his expression. He was torn, and in his indecision, I felt myself unraveling. The following week, Emily reached out to me. It was unexpected, her name flashing on my screen like a warning. She wanted to meet for lunch, claiming she hadn't seen me in months. Anxiety clawed at me. Had Daniel confessed? Or had she simply sensed the fracture in him and traced it back to me? When we met, her smile was polite, but her eyes studied me too closely. She spoke of Daniel, of how distant he had become, how she feared he was slipping away. "You're his best friend," she said. "Do you know what's going on with him?" I shook my head, careful to mask every truth. "He's just stressed," I offered weakly. "Work, life, you know how he gets." She nodded, though I wasn't sure she believed me. Guilt roared inside me like a storm, yet I held my silence. That night, Daniel texted, "She talked to you, didn't she?" "Yes," I replied. "She's worried." His response came minutes later, sharp and final. "We need distance. From each other. For everyone's sake." I stared at the words until they blurred. Distance. From him. From us. From the memory of a love that was never allowed to exist. And yet, as much as it tore me apart, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a fracture, painful, unresolved, but alive. The mountain had changed us. What lingered was not a mistake to be erased, but a truth neither of us could completely abandon, no matter how far apart we drifted.